Welcome back to GOT. Today we're going to do a deep dive on the cameras on the Motorola Razr Fold and the Pixel 10 Pro Fold. We're going to pixel peep and dig deep into the photos and the videos. Now, if this is your cup of tea and you want to see the rest of the comparison, I did that video and you want to check that out. That said, if you're ready to nerd out with me on these phones, let's take a look at the photos and the videos. So this time we're going to start off with night photos. Got Motorola here on the left and Pixel on the right. And just to tell you a little bit about them, the main sensor is a 48 megapixel here on the Pixel and a 50 megapixel on the Motorola. And then you got the zoom lens there. Both are 10 times zoom, 10 megapixel zooms. One's a 0.5 and one's a 0.8, and I get them mixed up. But on the 5 times zoom here on the Pixel, it is a 10 point something, and on the ultra wide, it's also a 10 point something. So the zooms and those secondary cameras are not that great. We're over here on the Motorola, it's a triple 50, so it's 50 on all three. So you got your main shot right here, and they both look pretty comparable because you got a 48 versus a 50. So they look really good. And then when we zoom in 3 times here, you can see that the Pixel begins to suffer a little bit here with light kind of blowing out here on that fluorescent lighting. So you can see it's a lot better, and you lost your brick here where you can see the brick here detail on this one. And then when we go down to the standard 5 times, the Pixel does a little bit better because this is a dedicated 5 times lens. But again, the brick is gone and things are just a little bit clearer here, but the brick is washed out versus here. You still see the brick. Everything looks good. You see more pixels here. The Pixel avoids showing pixels, but it's all blurred, you know, versus over here, you can see a little bit of pixelation when you crop in. You shouldn't crop in, especially at night on a photo. Zoom in, take that picture, and be happy with it. And then when we go to 10 times, the Pixel does okay, but again, everything's blurred out versus you have more detail here on the Motorola, and you can see the brick. Then we go into 20 times on both of them, and you can see here the difference. The Pixel does okay at 20 times, because it doesn't have to worry about the light. It's just using what light's there. So it does actually better here on this sign, although you do lose a little bit of detail versus here, everything's a little clearer. And I think my overall preference is still the Motorola because you're talking about a 50 megapixel versus a 10. And then just to show off a little bit here on the Motorola, you can go 30 times and you can actually go 100 times. And just to give you an idea how far that is, when you look at this photo, that's way down here. These lights way at the end of the street here. That's a long ways off, and you can see them here on the Motorola. Now going to another view here on the street, and we're going to be able to see a lot more detail because there's a lot more stuff here in this photo. This is your standard, and they're both doing really good. The street here is what's called aggregate squares. Another word, aggregate means you can actually see exposed aggregate. You can see the little pebbles inside the concrete. And I think everything's a little bit clear here. It's a little bit more lit up here on the Motorola. So there is a little bit more clarity here. And then when we go to the next photo here, this is the 3 times. 3 times doesn't do too bad. And when you zoom in on it, you can see they do okay, but everything's blurred, okay? Because you're talking a 10 megapixel lens versus over here, which is a 50 megapixel. And I don't think these bricks or these brakes on this truck did anything to this photo. I'm sure some of you may think it does, but we'll go ahead and this is the 5 times versus a 6. And again, we'll go ahead and zoom in. Now the 5 times again is a dedicated lens here on the Motorola. So it's doing a whole lot better here. You can see some clarity in the signage here. And then of course over here, you got that 50 megapixel lens. So it doesn't have an issue already. But again, you're starting to see that pixelation where Motorola just blurs. And then going to the next photo here, this is a 10 times, or this is 20 times. This is the 10 times, I'm sorry. And you can see that they're both doing pretty good. The Pixel's actually doing better than you would think, with this 10 times zoom. Of course, all this is kind of gone way down here in the distance where you can actually see it better here. But it's capturing everything okay. You can actually read these signs, which is great. And this is actually lighting up a little bit because you can see it kind of blew in the wind and there's a light right up here at the top. So it's lighting it up. Now let's go ahead and go on down to 20 times. This is 20 times on both of them. And again, it just gets dark here. It's like the Pixel gives up. I can't see it. So it just goes dark here. Where here you can see everything just fine. And then there's a selfie camera on both of them. You got a 40 megapixel here on the Pixel and a 20 megapixel on the Motor. Motorola really suffers because, you know, this selfie camera here and even the one on the inside, you know, it's 32 megapixels, but believe me, it comes out about the same as the 22 mega or the 20 megapixel. So it's not that great. And as you can see here, even when you zoom in just a little bit here on this one, it does a whole lot better. And here it's just, I don't know, just not doing so great. And I think I just used the standard camera. I didn't use it in portrait mode on that shot. And then when you use the rear facing camera on both of them, much better. Okay, so Motorola's has a better representation here than it did on front facing camera. And then you can zoom in just a little bit here and you can see that, you know, it's doing really good. Now it's looking at some daytime shots. Again, the same thing, 48 megapixel versus 50. This is standard, and I think they're both doing great. You can be happy with any. I think there's a little bit more light available here on the Motorola, which gives you a little bit more visibility, and it's a little more colorful, I think. And then we go to the next shot here. This is a 3x zoom on both of them. And if we crop in here, you can see that this is the 3 megapixel. And then if we crop in here, you can see the 10 megapixel at work. It's just not comparable to a 50 megapixel lens. You see here, you can see the tattooing, you can't see it here. And then the bricks start to blur. And then when we go into 5x versus 6x, again, Pixel does a little bit better with that 5 megapixel dedicated camera. See, now you can read the tattooing here versus here, you know, so it's not bad at all. But you can definitely see you get a lot more clarity overall here on the Motorola. And then when we go to 10x on both of them here, same thing. It does pretty good at 10x here on the Pixel versus 10x over here on this one. You know, it's not bad until you look up above here at the brick and you can see that the brick starts to blur and kind of lose things a little bit here. Then we go into that 20x on both of them and you can see here, you know, the Pixel's holding its own, you know, with that 10 megapixel camera at 20x. You know, it's pretty incredible what they do with the processing. As a matter of fact, this Willow Creek even looks a little bit clearer. You know, they do have AI assisting it on both of these phones, but I think you could be overall happy with what Pixel's doing here. Now, 20x is the max on the Pixel. Now, in this set of pictures, we're going to go ahead and look at the shadows and look how everything looks like in the shade because we're going to go down the street with it. And you can see they're both doing really good here on the main shooter. And then when we zoom in, we crop in, of course, it's a 10 megapixel here on the Pixel. And it doesn't do too bad if you don't crop in. But once you start to crop in, you can see it's doing okay, but you can't really make this out versus over here on the 50 megapixel. You can definitely make everything out no problem. And then when we go down to 5x versus 6x, again, the 5x does a little bit better. So when we zoom in on these, you can start to read this stuff. So that's not bad versus over here on the 50x. You know, it's an no-brainer. You get to see it all. Now, I do have to take a minute and say I'm in awe of what Pixel's able to do with this 10 megapixel lens, you know, at that 5x zoom dedicated camera. It does really well. It's very compatible or comparable to the 6x zoom here on the Motorola with a 50 megapixel sensor. Now we go in a little bit closer. This is the 10x, and you can see here that the Pixel does really well right here at the 10x zoom using that 5 megapixel sensor versus the 50 megapixel zoom over here on the Motorola. And then when we go one step further, go to that 20x, the Pixel again does pretty well. Matter of fact, you can almost say that this looks like it's over processing, but I think it's just allowing a little more color. Things are just a little more saturated here. But again, I got to give it to Pixel with that 10 megapixel lens. This is pretty impressive. Now, as I said, that 20 megapixels, that's the max of the Pixel. I don't know why. I thought they used to have that 100x, but maybe that's just on the standard Pixel Pro. So we'll go here and we look at selfies here. You can see here on this selfie, you know, again, suffering on the Motorola versus the Pixel. Not so great. Then we go to that rear facing camera again, and we get a lot better image here on the Motorola than we did before. And then when you zoom in, the Pixel seems to zoom in a lot more, a little more uncomfortably, I think, when it does this little bit of a zoom in on a selfie camera or on the rear facing camera. But again, if you're going to do any selfies on the Motorola, you want to make sure to use that rear facing camera. Now let's move on and check out the videos on these things. Now I'm just going to narrate here during these video shots. You don't want to hear a bunch of street noise because it does get loud. But as you can see here, they both are pretty comparable. Motorola now is on the right side and the Pixel's on the left, but the Motorola adds a little bit more color, I think, or natural color, because it's using HDR, and then it also has another Dolby Vision processing. So it does do things really well. And then the Pixel is holding its own here. They're both using that 48 and a 50 megapixel lens on the Motorola. Now, the colors on site, I think they were a little bit more natural on the Motorola here. You can see things kind of got a little wonky or washed out there on the Pixel when we looked at little garden area. But overall, they're doing really good. I do think that the Pixel yellows things just a little more. As you can see right here, the sidewalk's a little more yellow, and it's more natural color here on the Motorola. And same with the buildings here across the street. When you look, that bank building gets a little bit more darker on the Pixel, a little more natural. Now, this is at night. Now, at nighttime, the Pixel, look at this thing, it really starts to jello. Now, this is the Pixel's normal setting. Now, the Pixel does have what we talked about before, is that magic boost, that it will do. And we'll turn that on here in just a minute and see those, or just a few seconds. But as you can see, the coloring and everything looks good, and it's 4K, but there's quite a bit of jello going on. And if you remember that, if you saw my last video where actually the Honor Magic did a lot of this as well at night. But we do have that boosting that we can turn on with the Pixel 10. So I'm going to show you that here in just a second. So now here's the footage with that night boost or video boost or whatever you want to call it on the Pixel. You see, it's a lot better. It's still, I don't think, is as good or clear as the Motorola, but the Motorola seems to be doing just a little bit more jelloing than the Pixel does. Now, the Pixel color isn't quite as natural. It's more natural on the Motorola. It's still yellow on the Pixel, but as you can see, all that jello is gone. Now, the problem with it is you've got to let it process, and it can take a couple hours to process this 1 minute segment, which is crazy. So you can't get it right away, but you can see right here, they both are comparable. Now, something I want you to notice, you can see these little, what I call them fireflies, going on here in the Pixel. And I freeze the frame here. You can see them right there at the bottom. It just has some light reflections. I don't really care for that, but as you can see with that video boost, it's right up there with the Motorola. Now we're going to get into some nighttime selfie videos, and this time I'm going to talk and you'll be able to hear on the audio, so I'm going to be quiet now. Okay, here's the Motorola Razor Fold and the Pixel 10 Pro Fold at night. This is a selfie, and as you can see, the Motorola, it struggles. I think it has to be one of the worst ones on selfies. That's because, it only does 1080p. I don't know why that is, but that's just the way it is. So it doesn't do too well. But how are they doing on sound here? In a moment, we'll flip it and do the back cameras. But look at that, I'm walking in the darkness. I disappear on the Motorola, so it doesn't do too well. So there you go. That's the two of them at night. So I think that the Motorola is doing really good with this rear-facing camera. It always seems to, because it's so much better than its selfie cameras. And the selfie cameras, they're not bad, but the Pixel's 40 megapixels, I believe, where you only got 20 megapixels on the Motorola on the selfie. But here on the rear camera, you just can't beat it. I mean, I think Motorola does really, really well. So there we go. That is the selfie on the rear-facing cameras. And I just walked through the darkness, and you notice how I didn't fade this time on the Motorola. So you see they're very compatible at night if you turn on that magic boost on the Pixel. So it does really good that way. And then when it comes to selfies, oh my goodness, the Pixel is so much better until you use the rear view camera, and then you get a better video on the Motorola. So that's the catch. Don't use the selfie camera on the Motorola really for anything because it's horrible. So there you have it, Motorola versus the Pixel 10 Pro Fold on the cameras. What do you think? You know, I think a Motorola overall is better. You've got the 50 megapixel cameras times three versus those two 10 megapixel cameras, although their processing does good. However, you can only do so much with processing, Pixel. You need to step up those cameras because you've got them in your pro cameras, your standard bar phone. Why didn't you put them in here? And you can't tell me that you can't because this is the thickest phone out there and they're doing it in these phones. So overall, yes, the cameras are better on the Motorola Razr, although you did get some fine shots. And I think a lot of people that don't know any better will be happy with the Pixel because it does do good photos and daytime videos. When you get into the nighttime, well, that's a little shady unless you use that magic boost or whatever it's called, video boost, because without that, it's really bad. Now, overall between the two, I'm just not one that cares to be that basic with Android. It's just a little too basic, not a whole lot of features. Get a whole lot more features here. Although they are improving on the multitasking, I do appreciate what they've done there. But I still think that the Pixel, at least the Pixel Fold, is probably on its way out. I think that now that these other manufacturers and that Pixel is making foldable apps or their Android to accommodate foldables, I think that they're going to back away because I think the whole thing was just an experiment to teach these other manufacturers how to set up their foldables. And as we know all along, Pixel or Google is an advertiser. They're not really big on hardware, although they're starting to come out with their own laptop. But of course, that's a whole nother story. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? What do you think about both phones all together? The previous review on comparing these things and the photos. Do you have the Pixel Fold and maybe the Motorola? And what is your comparison? Let me know down in the comments. What do you think? And if there's something I missed that you want to see, let me know that as well. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well so you don't miss out on more content. And don't forget to smash that like button because it really does help out the channel. If you haven't seen the first part of this video comparing these two things, check out the video here. Until next time, have a wonderful day and God bless.